So the next factor determining demand is changes in the price of the related goods. So when there is a change in related goods, maybe substitute goods or complementary goods, there will be a changes in the demand. So changes in these other related goods will also determine the demand for that goods. So the demand for a good is also, affected by the price of other goods, especially, those which are related to it as substitutes or complements. So when we draw a demand schedule or a demand curve for a good, we take the prices of the related goods as remaining constant. But when this, related goods changes, the demand for a commodity or demand will also change. Therefore, when the prices of the related goods such as substitutes or complements change, the whole demand curve would also change. The whole demand curve would change its position, whether it can shift upward or shifting downward. So, in order to understand this, we have to know what are close substitutes or what are substitute goods. So, when the rise in price of a good cause increase in the demand for another good, the two goods are called substitute of each other. Suppose we can take the example of coffee and tea. So, how do we explain that coffee and tea are substitutes in this context? So, let us say the price, for coffee has increased, let us say. So, with the increase in the price of coffee, the demand for tea will increase because the price for coffee has increased. Then the demand for tea will increase. So price of coffee increase, the demand for tea increases, and vice versa. Once the price for coffee falls, then the demand for tea, what will the demand for tea do? The demand will also decline for tea because the price of coffee has fallen and people will buy more of coffee because the price has fallen for coffee. So in this way, in this context, we can say that, coffee and tea are close substitutes. Because, let me repeat, when there is a rise in the price of coffee, the demand for tea increases, and when the price of coffee falls, the demand for tea decreases. So in that way, coffee and tea are close substitutes, or they are considered as substitute goods. So we shall see in detail through the diagram how the demand curve shifts either rightward or leftward when there is a change in the price of a substitute goods. So we are taking the example of coffee and tea. So at figure 9, we are measuring quantity demanded of tea on the x-axis and price on the y-axis. So price is given at P. So figure 9 is showing the rightward shift in the demand curve of tea as price rise for substitute goods, that is coffee. Here, this diagram is showing the rightward shift, or the demand curve has shifted towards the right as the price for coffee has increases, which means that quantity demanded for tea has increases with the rise in the price of coffee, because tea and coffee are close substitutes. Let me repeat again. Here at x-axis, we are measuring the quantity demanded of tea. So when there is an increase or when there is a rise in the price of coffee that is a close substitute of tea, then the quantity demanded for tea will increase. So earlier, before the rise in the price of a substitute goods, that is coffee, the demand curve is DD. And quantity demanded of tea is only Q, OQ, at price OP. Once there is a rise in the price of a substitute good, that is coffee, the quantity demanded for T has increased to OQ dash. From OQ1 to OQ dash, it has increased, and demand curve has shifted towards the right from DD to D dash D dash. So we can conclude that when there is an increase in the, or there is a rise in the price of a substitute good, that is coffee, the quantity demanded increases for tea, which is a substitute for coffee. So when price of a substitute good increases, the quantity demanded increases. So it is affecting the quantity demanded of a good when the price of a commodity, when the price of a substitute changes. So in figure 10, that is, we are explaining the leftward shift in the demand curve of tea due to the fall in the price of its substitute, that is coffee. Here we have seen the rise in the price of coffee. Here we are looking at the fall in the price of coffee. So earlier, before the rise of or before the fall of price of the coffee, the demand curve is at DD and price is at OP, and a consumer is demanding OQ amount of tea. So once the price for coffee has fallen, so the quantity demanded for tea reduces, because coffee is cheaper than tea now, and people will prefer more of coffee. So quantity demanded for tea has reduced from OQ to OQ dash. So with the fall in the price of coffee, the demand for tea has reduced. So the changes in the price of a substitute has affected the quantity demanded of a tea. So in this case, there is a fall in the price of a coffee, and then the quantity demanded for tea, that is substitute for coffee, has reduced. So we are witnessing a leftward shift of the demand curve from DD to D dash D dash, and quantity demanded for tea has reduced from OQ to OQ dash because price of a substitute good, that is coffee, has fallen. So we have discussed about the substitute goods, or how will the changes in price of a substitute goods will affect the demand for the other substitute goods. So here we are going to discuss about the complementary goods. So how will the changes, or how will it affect the demand for a commodity good when there is a changes in the price of another complementary goods? So what is complementary goods all about? So the rise in price of any of them, which means the rise in the price of any complementary good, will lead to the decrease in the demand for the other goods. So it is opposite to a substitute good, because when there is a rise in the price of a complementary good, then this will lead to the decrease in the demand for the other good also. So it is the changing of the demand for that good when there is a change in the price of another complementary good. So within complementary good, if there is a rise in the price of any of them, will lead to the decrease in the demand for the other goods. So complementary goods, we often say tea and sugar, bread and butter, ink and pen, car and petrol. These are some of the examples of complementary goods. So figure 11 and figure 12 will give us a clear picture of complementary goods and how changes in the price of any of them will lead to the changes in the demand for the other complementary good. So figure 11 shows the demand for quantity demanded for sugar when there is a rise in the price of tea. So again, on the x-axis we are measuring quantity demanded of sugar, y-axis we are measuring price of a sugar, and price is given at P. So figure 11 shows the leftward shift in the demand curve of sugar due to rise in the price of tea. Here we are taking the example of tea and sugar as a complementary good. So this diagram talks about the effect of rise in the price of tea on sugar. So what will happen when the price of tea occurs? So what will the demand for sugar do when the price of tea rises? So when the price of tea rises, the quantity demanded for sugar decreases. Here DD is the previous demand curve. Once the rise in price of tea has increased, once rise in the price of tea increases, the demand for sugar decreases. So demand curve shifts from DD to D dash D dash. And when there is a rise in the price of tea, quantity demanded has reduced from OQ to OQ dash. So we have a leftward shift. Leftward shift means quantity demanded for sugar has reduced because there is a rise in the price of tea. So when the rise in the price of tea happens, the quantity demanded for sugar declines. So that is the relationship between complementary good. Again, figure 12 shows what will happen when there is a fall in the price of a complementary goods, that is tea. When price of tea falls, what will happen to demand for sugar? The demand for sugar increases, and that is why we have a rightward shift of the demand curve from D to D dash dash D dash dash demand curve. Rightward shift means quantity demanded for sugar has increases from OQ to OQ dash when there is a fall in the price of a complementary good, that is tea. When price falls for tea, people will buy more of sugar because people will take more tea. People take more tea means people will buy more of sugar. So rightward shifts means quantity demanded for sugar has increased because there is a fall in the price of a complementary goods, that is tea in this example. So the next factor determining demand is the number of consumers in the market. And we have explained that consumers or market demand is obtained by summing up all the consumers' demand in the market at various price levels. So the greater the number of consumers of a good, the greater the market demand for good. So the greater the number of consumers, which means the greater will be the demand for the commodity. So how does demand for commodity arrive? There are many ways consumers increase, or the consumer may increase their demand for that commodity. So when the seller of the good